I really thank everybody for getting here as quickly as they could. I know this was short notice, but October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and we're really excited to make this announcement at the beginning of it. We've got tons of fun over the course of the next, what do we have, like 29 days left, right? So you can follow us along on our website, opdv.ny.gov. But I want to immediately throw it right on over to our Executive Director, Kelly Owens, who's here to talk about this great new partnership that we have with Don McPherson and the Alliance of New York State YMCAs. Kelly, come on up.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kelly Owens. I'm the Executive Director of the New York State Office for the Prevention of Domestic Violence. Let me tell you what that is, because some of you might not be familiar with us. We are a small but mighty state agency that really oversees the delivery of services and policy as it pertains to domestic and gender-based violence. We do that through a survivor-centered, trauma-informed, and culturally responsive lens. That's what we do. We advise the governor, the legislature, providers, and the community on how they can address the issue of domestic and gender-based violence. Gender-based violence, for those of you who aren't familiar with that term, it includes things like domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking, trafficking, all of those things that is uncomfortable to talk about. So that's what we do. Part of our job is to really understand communities and how communities are addressing the issue of domestic and gender-based violence. And we have been doing a lot of the same things for a number of years. I'm sorry about that, whatever that was. And we've been talking to one another who do this work every day. And what we know we need to do is things differently. If we really want to impact change and have a different conversation that we've been having for the past 30 years about how to address gender-based violence and domestic violence, we really got to engage different people. So about 2 years ago, I was traveling to college campuses because we run the Enough is Enough sexual assault program. And I got to Syracuse University. And Syracuse University said to me, well, Kelly, are you working with Don McPherson? And I said, well, no, but I would like to, because I know Don from when I was a Syracuse University student, and Don was my quarterback. So I had been doing this work for a long time, didn't realize Don had been doing this work for a long time. And we got together, we had a conversation. And our first conversations, I was like, what is he talking about? And I would say things that I can't repeat, because I would say, Don, you know, I was really coming at it from a lens I had had for years. And Don's been doing this work for a long time, and I think he'll talk a little bit about this. But then I realized it wasn't about me. That the conversation that we needed to have was about how men see this, and how men need to be engaged in the work, not only for young boys, but for themselves. And that's a very different conversation that we've been having in the gender-based violence world. So if we really want to effectuate change, we have to engage men differently. And let me be clear, domestic violence affects all genders. It predominantly affects women, but it does affect all genders. So Don and I have been traveling around, talking to colleges, and we said, you know what, we just can't contain this to the college setting. And then I thought of my friend Kyle. Kyle and I go back a long time. I was a YWCA woman, I will admit. But Kyle and I once worked together on agricultural issues. And I thought, you know, if we really want to talk about where communities are at YMs. And they're engaging in all kinds of things, from childcare to sports to youth programming. Where can we really start to have some impact? So we sat down with Kyle, and Kyle said, I think this is a good idea. So that's how it all happened, and we're happy to be launching that program this month in regards to Domestic Violence Awareness Month. But I really want to talk about the fact that this really isn't about, we're not putting the violence first, we're putting the healing and the conversation first. So I think I'm thrown to Don.
You're thrown.
I'm throwing to Don. So Don's gonna come up and talk about the program and talk about what his philosophy, you're looking at me like that. So Don and I have a bit of a shtick. I won't bring it to you today, but Don McPherson.
Thank you, Kelly. I've been doing gender-based violence prevention work for 30 years, and you would think after that time you get a little cynical and a little discouraged because you keep seeing the problem over and over. I've never been more excited about collaboration or partnership than I am about this, because as Kelly said, there are the conversations that are tough to have. I always say that the conversations we've all been raised not to talk about. You don't talk about the abuse in your family, you don't talk about the violence in your family, the drug addiction, the alcoholism, all those things. We are silent in our families about those problems, and that's why they continue to happen. And I started doing work here in Central New York when I was a student at Syracuse, as Kelly mentioned, so many years ago, where I played football. And,
Not that many years ago, Don.
it was a long time ago. And I started doing work around drug driving programs. And I knew the work that we were doing in schools, talking to young people. I always said I was talking to people too young to drink and too young to drive about the behavior of their parents. And we weren't engaging parents in that conversation. And so over the past 30 years of trying to engage with boys and men around the prevention of, and Kelly calls it gender-based violence, I call it men's violence against women, because it is predominantly overwhelmingly perpetrated by boys and men. So if we're going to address that problem, we have to really drill down on what's going on with our boys. That means fathers, coaches, men who impact the lives of boys, including mothers, but very specifically, because as Kelly said, we've been doing this work, I've been doing this work for 30 years, and not much has changed. And if you continue to do the same thing over and over and you don't change your behavior, we know it will go back. And so this partnership really gives us a chance, because the YMCA is the quintessential community hub that allows us to reach the entire social ecosystem of our families and our communities and schools. I think about the YMCA in the context of my daughter on Long Island. She did pre-K at the Y. We were family members, and then she actually was a lifeguard at the YMCA, got her certification as a lifeguard at the YMCA. And so it was her school, it was where her family met, and it was also a workplace for her. And so that's why the Ys, and this Y in particular is such a beautiful facility, is the hub of the community. And so it's a perfect place with a partnership with OPDV and myself to deliver what I call aspirational masculinity, which is a positive conversation to engage boys and men about what we want for them. Not what we want them to prevent or what we want them to do for others. What we truly want for our boys, that includes our fathers and our brothers and our sons, all boys and men in this conversation. And I talk about what we want for them is that they live authentic, whole, and evolving lives. It's across the lifespan. And so once again, this partnership with the YMCA allows us, as you just walking in here, there were little ones walking around my ankles as I came through the front door, and then as I went through the building, I saw the entire spectrum of generations in this building. And so it gives us an opportunity to reach the entire family, to the entire community. So I'm very excited, not just the work with OPDV over the last couple of years of developing this concept of aspirational masculinity, but the partnership with the YMCA that allows us to really move this conversation of common language across the social ecosystem and intergenerations. So with that, I will turn it over to Kyle to take it from there. All right.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kyle Stewart, and I am the Executive Director of the Alliance of New York State YMCAs. And first of all, a big thanks to the YMCA of Central New York and everyone here at the Northwest Family Branch for hosting us. Really appreciate that. And a kind of a last minute couple of phone calls and texts, so really appreciate you hosting us today. So YMCAs across the state of New York, there's about 36 YMCAs across the state of New York, but that's one of those 36 is what you're where you are here today, YMCA of Central New York. There are several branches. So there's about 140 branches across the state of New York, and we actually serve every year more than 1.5 million New Yorkers in our programming. So as Kelly said, and as Don said, we do try to bring as much of a scope to the work that we're going to talk about here, that we're talking about here today. we're super excited to be part of the conversation. You know, when Kelly reached out and we had some conversations with Don, and certainly, you know, my friendship with Kelly and certainly my growing friendship with Don has led to my commitment to this. What we will be doing is just trying to really engage and embedding the Aspire model into our programming. So as Kelly said, we are the largest provider of school-age childcare across the state of New York. We will be looking at our programming. We'll determine what's the relevant programs to bring this model to. And we'll continue to work with Kelly and Don to make that happen. Our stretch, and I certainly appreciate the comments about the YMCA being sort of a community hub. We certainly feel like we are. We serve all members of all kinds. And so we're excited to bring this model, and we're excited to be part of the statewide initiative. As Don said, something needed to change in this conversation, and we as YMCAs feel something needed to change from our perspective as well. We need to get involved, and we're certainly excited to do that. So thank you very much. Should I pass it back to Kelly?
Thank you, Kyle. So I just want to mention a couple of other things, and then we'll take any questions from you or from the press. So this year, under Governor Hochul's leadership, there's been an unprecedented amount of investment into domestic and gender-based violence. Yesterday, she announced $35 million that will be used across the state to do coordinated communities response, which means we will be engaging law enforcement, probation, the local DV provider, the district attorney's office, to really figure out how is a community responding to domestic violence, and what could we all be doing better to make sure that survivors find safety and survivors find a system in which it is survivor-centered, trauma-informed, and culturally responsive. Too often, somebody enters one part of that system and doesn't make it through to get the safety and support that they need. So coordinated community response will be part of that, as well as high-risk teams, identifying those cases that have a level of lethality to them. There are lethality indicators that we use to identify whether or not that case could end in murder. I know this is hard to talk about, and it's probably not something that we all want to talk about, but it's really important that everybody understands that if we're going to address domestic and gender-based violence, it takes a community to do that. Also, we are one of the first states in the country to offer flexible funding. We have a $5 million pot of money that goes directly to survivors to allow them the cash that they might need to find safety without a lot of restrictions to that cash, to allow them to maybe pay a credit card bill off, maybe make a car payment, maybe find maybe they need money for a security deposit. Because often in a domestic violence situation, well, more than often, about 90% of domestic violence situations involve financial abuse, which limits somebody's access to money, which also limits somebody's access to safety. So I really want to highlight those two programs. This is part of that whole approach. This is a preventive approach, although Don would say promotional approach. We're not going to prevent, we're going to promote the fact that we all need to be better. So that's kind of what our packages look like. This governor is incredibly dedicated to ending domestic violence. She told a story yesterday about her own personal story of her mother. So this is an incredible time for us as a state to be able to really address the issue of domestic violence. So with that, I'll take any questions anybody might have. All right. Well, thank you all, and thank you to the YM for hosting. Thank you to Don for coming. And I appreciate all of your support as we move this project forward. Thank you so much.
I'm so